Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. So this is part 3 video on .NET 7 API and Vue 3 CRUD sample application. Okay, let's understand what is Web API. Web API is a framework for building HTTP services that can be accessed by any client like a browser application or a mobile device application or a desktop apps. Okay, in simple terminology, API means application programming interface, means interface module that contains programming functions that can be requested via HTTP calls for fetching or to save the data at the server. Okay, so some of the key features of API are it supports HTTP verbs like get, post, put, delete. So these represents get means for fetching the data, post means for posting the data means creating the new record, put means for updating the existing record, delete means for deleting the existing record at the server. Okay. By default, API returns two default responses like XML and JSON, and it is absolutely customized to define your own output as well. Okay, something like HTML images also you can return as a response from the API. Okay, so it can be self-hosted on all different kinds of platforms and can be consumed by all different kinds of applications. Okay, that this is the brief overview on Web API. And here is a small diagrammatic representation of Web API. Since already we discussed it, right? Web API fetches the data from the database and it can be served to any kind of application, like it is a desktop, mobile, or tablet, any kind of application. Okay. So let's create a sample .NET 7 application. Okay. Okay. First thing is to develop any .NET application, we need a IDE, integrated development environment. Okay. So the first recommended IDE is Visual Studio. Okay, so Visual Studio, we have a free edition to learn for the developers, that is community edition. You can see here. You can come to this link and you can see the download option. Okay, here it is showing for downloads for Visual Studio 2022 because .NET 7 is supported by VS 2022 only. Lower versions of VS won't support .NET 7. Okay, so the professional and enterprise are paid versions, and community is the free version. So this is one option, and this is the primary option. Okay, so you can click on the download, and this installer will be downloaded. You can run it, and it will take some around 1 hour for the installation. Once that is done, you are ready to go for creating the web API application. Since my system has some configuration issues to install the community edition, I am going to use another option, that is .NET CLI. Okay, so in this video, I am going to use the .NET CLI and I am going to use the IDE like Visual Studio Code Editor. Okay, we already use Visual Studio Code for Vue application creation, right? Same editor I am going to use for .NET also. Okay, but if you have an option to install community, please choose the Visual Studio as the first option. Okay. Okay, such like .NET 7 download, to use the .NET CLI commands, we have to install the .NET 7 SDK explicitly. If you are using Visual Studio, by default, the SDK will be automatically downloaded, but you should have the latest version of Visual Studio 2022. Okay, here you can see the .NET 7 supported Visual Studio versions for Mac and Windows as well, some 17.4. Okay, so you must get the latest to get the .NET 7 by default. Since I want to use the .NET CLA, right? So I have to install the SDK explicitly. For that, we have to navigate to this URL. Okay, and here is the latest .NET 7 SDK. So here you can see installers. Based on your operating system, you can install. If you are a Windows user, you can use x64. Okay, please download it and install it. Okay, Since I have already installed .NET 7 SDK into my system, I am not going to do it again. Okay. Previously, we have created the VueJS application, right? In the same folder, I am going to create my .NET 7 application as well. Okay. Using command prompt. Okay. Here is the .NET CLI command for creating the web API application. Okay. This command only works when you install SDK. Previously, I have shown you, right? Then only this CLI gets installed. Okay. So here is the command for installing the web API like .NET space new space template name. My template is web API, right? So web API space -o. -o represents I want to create a output directory. Means one folder. Inside of that folder, I want to create my .NET project. Okay. And here I specified my project like .NET 7 API.CRUD. Okay, let's run it. And here you can see the project got successfully created. You can see the application here. Okay, so let me open my project in Visual Studio Code Editor. Okay, here you can observe I have opened my project in Visual Studio Code Editor. And to develop the .NET application in Visual Studio Code Editor, we required one extension. Okay, that is C#, which was provided by Microsoft itself. You need to install this extension. That's it. Nothing is required. Okay. Now let's go to the application. And now let's observe the default things in our application. Okay. If you see program.cs is the startup file of our application. Okay. Here you can see the default services that are registered like controller service and endpoint API Explorer, that service for uh, support the minimal API and Swagger service. And you can also observe the after the service registrations, you can see the middlewares. Okay, and you can observe there is a condition to work the Swagger page only for development environment. And you can see HTTPS redirection. This middleware helps if the request come as HTTP, it will redirect to HTTPS. And authorization middleware and map controller. This controller will route our navigation to the respective controllers. Okay, so this is the default program.cs file. Okay, so now the main idea is I want to set up the database context. Okay, that means I want to use the NT framework core to communicate with my database. Here is our table, right? Previously we have created. So to communicate with this database from my application, I need a library that is NT framework core. Okay, there are several different libraries to communicate with the database, but one of the first choice is NT framework core. Okay, so using NT framework core, using code first with existing database, we are going to set up the database context. Okay, so to set up the database context file, first we have to install the NT framework core required packages. Okay, search like EF Core NuGet and click on the top link. Okay, if you are using Visual Studio, you can use this command from the package manager, or you can use the direct UI interface, package manager UI interface, where we can easily install the packages. Since I am using the CLI, right, I am going to use this .NET CLI command. So copy this command. Okay, in the Visual Studio Code, open the terminal. Okay, paste the command and run it. Okay, the package is installed successfully. To confirm it, the package got successfully installed. We can check in the CS project file. Okay, here you can see NT framework core package reference added. And here you can see target framework. I forgot to mention this initially. Here you can see our project is a .NET 7 application. Okay. Next, along with NT framework core, since our database is SQL, right? We have to install one more dependent library of the NT framework core that is related to SQL. Okay, such like EF core, SQL NuGet, and click on the top link. Okay, here is the SQL Entity Framework Core SQL NuGet package. So copy the link, open the terminal, install it. And you can see here, both the packages references are added here. That means packages are installed successfully. Okay. So now I can start creating the database context. Actually, what is database context? Database context is nothing but a simple class, C# class, but it will act as a database. Okay. From our code point view, database context will be the database. It will represent the database. Okay. So we can write queries on top of it and we can fetch the data or we can save the data to the database. Okay. So this database context usually contains all the tables. So how the database context class tables contains means we have to create classes for each table. For example, here we are dealing with the beach table, right? We are going to have a beach class. That class must be registered in the database context. So from that, we can query the database. Okay, that means first let me create a table class, that is a beach class. So what I will do, I'm going to create a folder like data. Okay, inside of the data folder, let me create one more folder like entities. So this entity folder contains all our classes that represent our table. In our case, we will have only one table, right? That is beach table. So let's create the beach table or beach class. Okay. So the class name must be matched with the table name. It is a convention when we use with the database context. Okay, here is our plain C# class. So to make it our table class, all the columns in the table must be registered as a properties in this class. Okay, like this we have to represent all our table columns as a class. And if you observe, I have prefixed the type with question mark that represent that column is a nullable column, means it can accept nullable values. Okay, so I have ready with my table class. Now I have to create the database context class. So now in the database data folder, let me create a database context class. Okay, so by convention, it is good to give the database name to the database context class. Okay, my database is my old, right? I will give like my old DB context. You can give any name, but it is a general convention to give it the database name as a name to the context class name. And here you can see my database context class, which is a plain C# class. Okay. Now to make it our DB context class, it must inherit DBContext that comes from Microsoft Entity Framework core library, which we just installed. Okay. Import the namespace. Okay. Now add the constructor. So to this constructor, let's register the DB context options. Okay. And to that options type is nothing but our context type and options, and those options must be passed to our base context. Okay, so that is my DB context class. So I have already mentioned, right, table classes must be registered as a properties inside of the database context so that we can interact with the respective tables. Okay, to register the table classes, we have to wrap it around DB set. Okay, and here my table class beach. So this property name must match with our table name. Okay, so that's it. That is my database context. Now I have to register my database context into my program.cs file as a service so that it can be injected wherever we want. So while registering, we required SQL connection string. So let's prepare the SQL connection string. Okay. So for my demo, I can use appsettings.development.json for adding the connection string. Okay. Here I will add like connection string. Instead of connection string, I will create a property like my old DB connection. Okay, here you have to add your connection string value. Okay, here is my connection string. Okay, let's decode it, how to prepare it. So connection string is the key value pair string. Okay, so here keys are default keys and values are we have to provide. Okay, so data source, it is a key and its value must be our server name, SQL server name. If you see here, my server name is local DB. Okay, so same value I have provided here. If you see here, initial catalog. Here, initial catalog means database name. If you observe here, master is there. It is not master. It's our name of our database. So what is the name of my database? My old DB. So let me replace it. Okay. So initial catalog means our database. And here you can see a key like integrated security that represents if the value provided as true means we are saying that use Windows authentication means our system authentication as a authentication value. So if you don't want to use authentication value, Windows authentication, then you can use instead of integrated security, you have to add two more keys like username and password. Okay, and connection timeout. And I have specified like 30 seconds. Okay, so this is how we can prepare the connection string. You can add lot of other things where SQL provides where we can use in the connection string, but these are sufficient key value pairs to make a SQL connection. Okay, so I am ready with my SQL connection. Now I can go to program.cs file. Now I have to register here. So to register it, builder.services.add db context and pass our db context name. Okay, and here we have to configure the options. So options dot use SQL server. Okay, that comes from the Microsoft Entity Framework core. So import the namespace, and here we have to pass our SQL connection string. So where is our connection in the app settings dot development dot JSON. So to get the connection string, my old DB connection value, we can use builder configurations dot get connection string, and here we have to pass the property name, my connection DB. Okay, that's it. We are done with setting the database context. Okay, next we are going to implement the read operation. Means we are going to create a endpoint get endpoint, and we are going to bind the API response into our VueJS application. Okay, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this video delivered some useful content to you all. If you like the video, please do support me by subscribing to my channel as well as liking the video. Soon we are going to meet with new content. Until then, signing off.